Hello, everyone. We've received news on January 11th, 2025 that Donald Trump has been convicted as a criminal. So, what's next? Can Donald Trump still become president? Will he go to prison? We'll discuss that in today's video. But before we start, since many people think I'm Donald Trump in this video, I also want to clarify that I'm not Donald Trump. My name is Total Trample, and I have no family connection to Donald Trump. All right, let's get started, shall we? Guilty. Trump becomes first former U.S. president convicted of felony crimes. Donald Trump became the first former American president to be convicted of felony crimes Thursday, as a New York jury found him guilty of all 34 charges in a scheme to illegally influence the 2016 election through a hush money payment to a porn actor who said the two had sex. Trump sat stone-faced while the verdict was read, as cheering from the street below could be heard in the hallway on the courthouse's 15th floor, where the decision was revealed after more than 9 hours of deliberations. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial, an angry Trump told reporters after leaving the courtroom. The real verdict is going to be fifth by the people. They know what happened, and everyone knows what happened here. Judge Juan M. Merchan set sentencing for July 11th, just days before the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, where GOP leaders, who remained resolute in their support in the aftermath of the verdict, are expected to formally make him their nominee. The verdict is a stunning legal reckoning for Trump and exposes him to potential prison time in the city where his manipulations of the tabloid press helped catapult from a real estate tycoon to reality television star and ultimately president. As he seeks to reclaim the White House in this year's election, the judgment presents voters with another test of their willingness to accept Trump's boundary-breaking behavior. Trump is expected to appeal the verdict and will face an awkward dynamic as he returns to the campaign trail tagged with convictions. There are no campaign rallies on the calendar for now, though he traveled Thursday evening to a fundraiser in Manhattan that was planned before the verdict, according to 3 people familiar with his plans who were not authorized to speak publicly. He's expected to appear Friday at Trump Tower and will continue fundraising next week. His campaign was already moving quickly to raise money off the verdict, issuing a pitch that called him a political prisoner. The falsifying business records charges carry up to 4 years behind bars, though Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg would not say Thursday whether prosecutors intend to seek imprisonment, and it is not clear whether the judge, who earlier in the trial warned of jail time for gag order violations, would impose that punishment even if asked. The conviction, and even imprisonment, will not bar Trump from continuing his White House pursuit. Trump faces 3 other felony indictments, but the New York case may be the only one to reach a conclusion before the November election, adding to the significance of the outcome. Though the legal and historical implications of the verdict are readily apparent, the political consequences are less so, given its potential to reinforce rather than reshape already hardened opinions about Trump. For another candidate in another time, a criminal conviction might doom a presidential run, but Trump's political career has endured through 2 impeachments, allegations of sexual abuse, investigations into everything from potential ties to Russia to plotting to overturn an election, and personally salacious storylines, including the emergence of a recording in which he boasted about grabbing women's genitals. The case's general allegations have also been known to voters for years and, while tawdry, are widely seen as less grievous than the allegations he faces in 3 other cases that charge him with subverting American democracy and mishandling national security secrets. Ahead of the verdict, Trump's campaign had argued that, no matter the jury's decision, the outcome was unlikely to sway voters and that the election would be decided by issues such as inflation. Even so, the verdict is likely to give President Joe Biden and fellow Democrats space to sharpen arguments that Trump is unfit for office, though the White House offered only a muted statement that it respected the rule of law. Conversely, the decision will provide fodder for the presumptive Republican nominee to advance his unsupported claims that he is victimized by a criminal justice system he insists is politically motivated against him. Trump maintained throughout the trial that he had done nothing wrong and that the case should never have been brought, railing against the proceedings from inside the courthouse, where he was joined by a parade of high-profile Republican allies and racking up fines for violating a gag order with inflammatory out-of-court comments about witnesses. After the verdict, Trump lawyer Todd Blanche said in television news interviews that he did not believe Trump received a fair trial and that the team would appeal based on the judge's refusal to recuse himself and because of what he suggested was excessive pre-trial publicity. Republicans showed no sign of loosening their embrace of the party leader, with House Speaker Mike Johnson lamenting what he called a shameful day in American history. He called the case a purely political exercise, not a legal one. The first criminal trial of a former American president always presented a unique test of the court system, not only because of Trump's prominence, but also because of his relentless broadsides on the foundation of the case and its participants. But the verdict from the 12-person jury marked a repudiation of Trump's efforts to undermine confidence in the proceedings or to potentially impress the panel with a show of GOP support. While this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today in this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors, by following the facts and the law and doing so without fear or favor, Bragg said after the verdict. The trial involved charges that Trump falsified business records to cover up a hush money payment to Stormy Daniels, the porn actor who said she had sex with the married Trump in 2006. The $130,000 payment came from Trump's former lawyer and personal fixer, Michael Cohen, to buy Daniels' silence during the final weeks of the 2016 race in what prosecutors allege was an effort to interfere in the election. When Cohen was reimbursed, the payments were recorded as legal expenses, which prosecutors said was an unlawful attempt to mask the true purpose of the transaction. Trump's lawyers contend they were legitimate payments for legal services. He denied the sexual encounter, and his lawyers argued at trial that his celebrity status made him an extortion target. Defense lawyers also said hush money deals to bury negative stories about Trump were motivated by personal considerations, such as the impact on his family, not political ones. They also sought to undermine the credibility of Cohen, the star prosecution witness who pleaded guilty in 2018 to federal charges related to the by suggesting he was driven by personal animus toward Trump and fame and money. The trial featured weeks of occasionally riveting testimony that revisited an already well-documented chapter of Trump's past. His 2016 campaign, threatened by the disclosure of an Access Hollywood recording that captured him talking about grabbing women sexually without their permission, also faced the prospect of other stories about Trump and sex surfacing that could have harmed his candidacy. Trump did not testify, but jurors heard his voice through a secret recording of a conversation with Cohen in which he and the lawyer discussed a $150,000 hush money deal involving a Playboy model, Karen McDougal, who has said she had an affair with Trump. Trump denies that affair. Daniels herself testified, offering a vivid recounting of the sexual encounter she says they had in a Lake Tahoe hotel suite. The former publisher of the National Enquirer, David Pecker, testified about how he worked to keep stories harmful to the Trump campaign from becoming public at all, including by having his company buy McDougal's story. Jurors also heard from Keith Davidson, the lawyer who negotiated the hush money payments on behalf of Daniels and McDougal. He detailed the tense negotiations to get both women compensated for their silence, but also faced aggressive questioning from a Trump attorney who noted Davidson had helped broker similar hush money deals in cases involving other prominent figures. The most pivotal witness, by far, was Cohen, who during days of testimony gave an insider's view of the hush money scheme and what he said was Trump's detailed knowledge of it. Just take care of it. He quoted Trump as saying. He offered jurors the most direct link between Trump and the heart of the charges, recounting a meeting in which a plan to have Cohen reimbursed in monthly installments for legal services was discussed. And he emotionally described his dramatic break with Trump in 2018, when he began cooperating with prosecutors after a decade-long career as the then-president's personal fixer. To keep the loyalty and to do the things that he had asked me to do, I violated my moral compass and I suffered the penalty, as has my family, Cohen said. The case, though criticized by some legal experts who called it the weakest of the prosecutions against Trump, took on added importance not only because it proceeded to trial first, but also because it could be the only one to reach a jury before the election. The other three, local and federal cases in Atlanta and Washington alleging that he conspired to overturn the 2020 election, as well as a federal indictment in Florida charging him with illegally hoarding top-secret records, are bogged down by delays or appeals. Trump formally convicted, but faces no punishment. President-elect Donald Trump became the first ever former or sitting president to be formally convicted of a felony Friday, as he was sentenced in his hush-money criminal case, but the president-elect was not given any penalties for his crimes. Key facts. Judge Juan Merchan gave Trump an unconditional discharge, meaning his conviction stands, but he won't face any penalties. After Trump was found guilty in May on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records, letting the president-elect walk free without any punishments. The sentence falls far short of the maximum penalties that Trump could have faced, as each of his 34 counts was punishable by up to 4 years in prison and or a maximum $5,000 fine, meaning the harshest sentence could have seen Trump imprisoned for the rest of his life, though that was always unlikely to happen. Trump attended the sentencing virtually and continued to deny any wrongdoing in a statement he read during the proceeding, saying the prosecution against him has been a very terrible experience and a setback for New York's judicial system, and claiming he's totally innocent and did nothing wrong. Merchan said last week he was inclined to impose the unconditional discharge sentence given Trump's impending presidency, which prosecutors said they would not oppose, and all but ruled out giving the president-elect prison time, noting it would not be practicable with Trump's upcoming inauguration. The judge explained his decision for the lenient sentence on Friday, saying an unconditional discharge is the only lawful sentence that would not encroach upon the highest office in the land, though he made clear his decision is because of Trump's position and not him personally, specifying the protections shielding Trump from legal liability are afforded to the office of the President of the United States and not the occupant of that office. With his sentencing, Trump can now be formally classified as a convicted felon, as the Justice Department notes being sentenced is necessary for a conviction. Crucial quote, "The protections afforded the office of the president do not reduce the seriousness of the crime or justify its commission in any way," Merchan said at Friday's sentencing, though he noted the protections of Trump's office are a legal mandate that the court must respect and follow. However, despite the extraordinary breadth of those protections, one power they do not provide is the power to erase a jury verdict. The judge went on to suggest that Trump would likely have faced a harsher punishment had he not been elected, saying, "Donald Trump, the ordinary citizen, Donald Trump, the criminal defendant, would not be entitled to such considerable protections." Trump responded to his sentencing on Truth Social Friday, railing against the charges against him and claiming the unconditional discharge proves there is no case, there was never a case, and this whole scam fully deserves to be dismissed. Even as Merchan made clear the lenient sentence was based on Trump's impending presidency and not on his actual conduct or anything about the case. Today's event was a despicable charade, and now that it is over, we will appeal this hoax, which has no merit, and restore the trust of Americans in our once great system of justice, Trump wrote. Can Trump appeal his conviction? Trump's sentencing means he can now formally appeal his conviction and try to have it overturned, which he has already said he will do. The president-elect has argued the case against him should be thrown out in light of the Supreme Court's recent ruling giving him some immunity from criminal prosecution and because of his impending presidency, though Merchan has already struck down both those claims. What is an unconditional discharge? New York law states an unconditional discharge can be imposed when the court is of the opinion that no proper purpose would be served by imposing any condition upon the defendant's release, and means the defendant is released without imprisonment, fine, or probation supervision. Can Trump pardon himself? No. Trump can only pardon federal charges once he becomes president, and he was convicted on state charges. It's also still legally unclear if he could pardon himself, even if they were federal charges. The Justice Department issued guidance during the Watergate scandal saying presidents can't pardon themselves, though the issue has never been tested in practice. What can't Trump do as a convicted felon? Convicted felons face a number of restrictions, and Trump will not be able to do things like own a firearm or hold state public office. He will not be barred from voting, as Florida, where Trump now resides, defers on that to the state law where the felon was convicted, and New York allows felons to vote as long as they're not incarcerated. Most notably for the president-elect, felons face a number of international travel restrictions, as more than a dozen countries, including Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, and China, bar convicted felons from entering. That could mean Trump will have to get special permission to travel there as president. As CBS News notes, President George W. Bush previously had to get a waiver to travel to Canada as president because he previously pleaded guilty to a drunk driving misdemeanor. Trump's restrictions could be cleared in 3 years when Trump becomes eligible to apply for a certificate of good conduct from New York State that would waive his legal restrictions. Key background. A jury found Trump guilty on 34 felony counts in May following a weeks-long trial, as Trump was charged based on a hush money payment his ex-attorney Michael Cohen made to adult film star Stormy Daniels ahead of the 2016 election. Trump reimbursed Cohen through a series of payments, which prosecutors successfully argued were falsely labeled as being for legal services. Trump was initially scheduled to be sentenced in July, but successfully managed to have the sentencing repeatedly pushed back, first to September and then until after the election. While Trump's sentencing was initially postponed following his presidential victory, Merchan scheduled it for Friday in a shock order last week, coming after even prosecutors had acknowledged it should likely take place after Trump leaves office. Merchan argued that the sentencing should still move forward because the fact it was delayed until right before the inauguration was Trump's own doing, and in requesting that it be pushed back until after the election, Trump should have been prepared for it to take place even if he won. Trump then frantically tried to have the sentencing paused, but Merchan, a New York appeals court, and the state's highest court all rejected his request. The sentencing got its final green light to move forward Thursday night when the Supreme Court allowed it to take place in a 5-4 ruling, finding the sentencing would not burden Trump's transition, given the trial court's stated intent to impose a sentence of unconditional discharge after a brief virtual hearing. Well, that's the news about Donald Trump, who was convicted and given the status of a convicted felon. Even though Donald Trump was found guilty, he did not receive any punishment. Nevertheless, Donald Trump intends to appeal in order to have his guilty status overturned. Once again, I am not Donald Trump. My name is Total Trample. That's all for this video. See you in the next one.